Thanks everybody for coming. I'm glad to have you here. Welcome to Utah Node.js. It's really good to see so many people, and I expect that over the next coming months we're going to have more and more people. This is going to be a great networking opportunity. If things go well, we'll actually be moving up to Lehigh, so the people from Salt Lake will come down and cross-pollinate with us, which would be awesome. Tonight, our presentation is by Christian, is it Rodriguez?
Crodier.
Crodier?
Yes.
Okay, Crodier, sorry. So Christian's going to present on getting your first coding career. And if you're watching this on YouTube and you want to follow Utah Node, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, give us a like if this content ends up being useful for you, and there will be some links down in the doobly-doo that are useful from including the presentation that you're seeing on the screen here.
All right. Well, I'm definitely excited to be here. My presentation is not just for people who are coming out of a coding boot camp or college. It's if you want to trade up for a different career. Maybe you're tired of being entry level and you want something new. Well, hopefully I have a tidbit or pro tip that'll definitely help you out. And I'm definitely excited. And anytime, if you have questions or concerns or want to give me pushback, or if you want to add your additional feedback, please go ahead. I don't know everything. And, we have some people here who have much more experience than I do. So my name is Christian Crodier, and I'm a computer programmer at Tyler Tech. We do web development front end and back end. On the front end, we do JavaScript. On the back end, we do SQL and Java. And I learned to code using things like Free Code Camp, LeetCode, and the University of Denver has a coding boot camp. The important one that I want to come back to is LeetCode. This is going to be very important, so remember this. And obviously, one of the things that you need to understand is as soon as you get out of a coding boot camp or out of college, you're not done learning. We were just talking about Golang. Golang is a new language. There's always going to be new languages. There's some really great computer programmers out there, but unfortunately, the languages and the technology they know is outdated. It's moved on. It doesn't matter how much experience you have. It doesn't matter how good you are at Cobalt. I'm sorry, the world has moved on.
But not from Fortran.
Yeah, some things aren't going to change, but that's a story for another day. All right. So when I first got out of my coding boot camp, it was very difficult. I honestly found that trying to find a job out when I was done was harder than learning how to code, because when I was struggling with an algorithm or something, I'd spend maybe a day or two, a couple of hours, and eventually I would get it. But trying to find work dragged on and on. I had to put in so many applications. It was so frustrating. So what I ended up doing is doing freelance for a little while. Did it pay very well? No. But it solved the issue that a lot of people did not want to hire me because I didn't have any experience. And that's kind of like a circular problem, right? You can't get experience, no one will hire you. So I made my own experience. And this might be a great option for you. It might not be. I know some people that they could work full time if they wanted to, but they just don't. And that's okay. You can find options that's gonna work out for you. And the boot camp I went to had a career services center. It didn't really help me out that much. And like this guy here at the bottom of the screen, I felt very frustrated. And after a while of putting in so many applications, I had to put in a lot of applications, throw my resume to many places. I finally landed my first computer programming job. And I was so excited. I remember the day I got it, I was still working at a customer service center, and I literally stood up out of my chair, knocked my chair down, and was yes. And I scared some of the workers around me, and I told them, no, everything's okay. You don't have to call them in white coats. I'm just really excited. And when I got to my new job, I was happy to code because I really love it. But it turned out to be the worst job ever. Not because I didn't like what I was doing. It was a hostile work environment. There was this one time I was speaking with one of my clients about some software I'd been working with them, And there was a shout fest between my coworkers in the background, shouting match, and the client heard. Yeah, it was bad. And there was another time where myself and another computer programmer, we made a mistake, and I own that mistake, and some people lost access. So the owner of the company calls us up, yells at us at the top of his lungs, threatens us, and then says, and to punish us, says we have to work on Saturday, and then hangs up the phone on us. And scenes like these were very common. It was a couple of times I'd go to lunch and some of my coworkers would be nearly at the point of tears. That's how hostile this work environment was. Fortunately, this place is not in Utah, so so you guys are safe. And I don't think they're hiring remote developers. And at this point, this is where I started researching how can I find a better job and get out of this position. Plus, the company wasn't doing that well because of COVID. So I'm going to share some things that I learned with you. Now, the U.S. Bureau of Statistics concluded that 85% of all jobs are filled by networking, and that's one of the reasons why we have these meetings. Come to these meetings. I'll be honest. Often when I come to these meetings, a lot of the stuff goes over my head. The majority. AJ, you're just too smart for me. I'm sorry, man. But that's just the way it is. But it provides a great opportunity for networking and finding the job. Often when they post jobs online, it's just a formality. Usually they already have someone in mind, and you want to be that guy they have in mind because they already know you. Now, right here at the bottom left is a picture of Rick Perry. He used to be the governor of Texas, and he ran for president. And I'll tell you, there's a point to this. Trust me, I'm not going to get political, but at first he had this great fundraising haul, and one of the reporters called one of his donors and asked him about this, and the donor went off on Republicans and conservatives, said how much he hated them, how they were terrible, and the reporter was perplexed. Well, you donated to Rick Perry and he's a Republican? Yeah, of course I donated to Rick Perry. He's my fraternity brother. We went to college together. So often there'd be people who will help you find work even though they don't care about tech and they don't know anything about tech. For example, here's Better Call Saul, one of my favorite characters from Breaking Bad. Let's just say I know a guy who knows a guy who knows another guy. So when I graduated from the coding bootcamp, I messaged everyone on Facebook and I sent texts to everyone I know saying, hey, I just graduated from a coding bootcamp and I'm looking for work. And some of the people who did not work in tech or who I wouldn't have suspected, they were able to help me find those freelance jobs, because you don't know who your friends know. Isn't it said that like we're separated from like 4 degrees? Isn't that
6 degrees?
6 degrees. Yeah, we're all separated from 6 degrees.
6 degrees of Kevin Bacon?
Yes, just like the game. So you never know who your family or friends know, and they're always willing to help you out. That's why it's so important that you're not just online, on LinkedIn, filling out those job applications. That's not the most efficient use of your time. All right, so I want to talk about how to make your resume stand out. So on the left-hand side, this is my old resume. Very boring. I mean, there's an opening statement, and then there's a list of my experience. I'll be honest, when the employer looks at your resume, they're only going to glance at it. They're not going to take a deep look, and then they're going to toss it down. They're not going to spend much time. So you need to make yours stand out so that you will occupy that mental space. Now on the right, this is my new resume. Notice I use a template, and this template has links and it has different colors and this really cool color shot. Now this template, maybe it's a good one for you, maybe it isn't. But you need to find a template that works for you to make that makes your thing that will make your resume stand out. Also, this one you can put in a PDF, which is really cool instead of just sending a Word document.
Don't ever send a Word document.
That's no bueno.
If somebody who's actually on the development team gets it, it will look like crap. because they don't have Word on their computer. The HR people have Word on their computer.
Yes, exactly. And sometimes they're often involved, and I think that's great feedback. And if anyone else wants to chime in, let me know. Let's see. Let's go to our next thing. Also, you want to make your cover letter fall out. So the one on the left, this is my old cover letter. It has a couple of paragraphs about my experience and things I've done. Very boring, very bland. But the one on the right, this is not me, but this is the one, the format that I use. So this one is so cool. For example, check out this line he starts off with. He says, he says, you have a small but dedicated team, and you are wondering why you should hire me for this full stack position. For example, isn't that an amazing opening line? It's different, it's unique. Plus, he's adapting into that position. And then he goes on to do something really cool. So he has these bullet points. He uses things like bold. He uses italics. He uses links. For example, this one is really cool. The one at the bottom, I want to call your attention to. I'll add diversity to your team, and research is shown. And if you click on that link, it'll take you to a link that's a Harvard Business Review talking about how diversity is really good. This is going to work for all of us. I'm sorry, but you can put links to the projects you created. If you don't have any working experience, maybe you've done some freelance. Very cool. This will make you stand out, and maybe you'll even find a format that's better than this. But please, let's not do boring cover letters. They're no bueno.
Do you have that template that you could put in the chat as a resource later?
Yes, I do this. He wrote a whole article, and that has this template in it, and I'll include that and in the chat later on, because this is important. I'm going to give you all my sources so that you can study for yourself.
And I added the PDF HTML resume template that I use in the chat too. I'll add yours when you get around to it.
Awesome. Yes, definitely these are things that we want to do to stand out and look different and to be different. Also, adapt to win. So at the bottom we have the Borg. The Borg, what do? They adapt, right? So the resume, adapt your resume to whatever job you're applying for. Not every job is the same. So you're gonna want to play up some skills. You're gonna want to play up certain projects that you've done, and others are not going to be that important. Move those towards the top. Give those more time. Just like this gentleman did with his cover letter. Do the same thing. Because if you're just copying and pasting, they're gonna tell. They're gonna know that you didn't do your research on the company. They know their company. Also, before you get to the interview, make sure that you know something about the company. You can go to the About section and do just some cursory research, because I've never gone to an interview where they have not asked me, so what have you heard about our company, or what do you know? Has that ever happened to you?
So if I ask, why do you want to work here? And the person says the worst possible answer is, I'm looking for a job. The interview's already over. Like, out of politeness, I'll ask some more questions, but they're not getting the job.
Mm-hmm.
If they say, well, I noticed that you guys do X, and at home, I had this project once where I was working on X, and I just thought it was kind of cool, or in school, I used to study X, or X has been something I've been wanting to learn about. I'm not really skilled at it right now, but I think it's something really cool. They're immediately in the, okay, now you've got my attention. I'm wanting to find out, how can I hire you? How can your lack of skills be compensated for the fact that you know what we do and you care?
That's a good answer. I mean, they showing that you care, that you've gone the extra mile, other than just filling out the application online and uploading your resume. Also, like I said, if you're going to work with recruiters, because recruiters will come, make sure you make a personal connection with them. For example, there was this recruiter, her name was Ashley, and I didn't start talking to her about jobs at first. We started talking about Mexican food, because we both really love Mexican food. And this was Endeavor. And if you ever get the chance to go to Reality Las Minas, please do. I mean, it's amazing. But that's neither here nor there. Learn their name and like find common ground, because if the recruiter knows you and has a personal relationship with you, people want to do nice things for people they like. If it's just very transactional, also the same thing with, so be nice to these two senior programmers. Buy them pizza, take them out for drinks, because they know a thing or two about a thing or two. They often have connections. And find him a corporate sponsorship if you have like a rich dad or something or whatever. But yeah, also if the recruiter or the job or the company offers you a position you're not really interested, just be honest that, you know, that's not my thing in a nice way. Don't leave them hanging, because maybe they're working hard trying to looking at all these positions when you're not really interested. That's just going to frustrate them and make them upset. But if you're honest with them, maybe later down the road, they'll find something they'll want to work with you because you're honest and you're a straight shooter. All right, so I also want to talk about using LeetCode to win. So what is LeetCode? So LeetCode teaches you different algorithms, and this can help you with the dreaded whiteboard question. So let me show you LeetCode really quickly. And I don't get paid to play up LeetCode. I'm not getting paid for any of these things. You can get a free account on LeetCode. They offer you a paid for one. Now, if you go to LeetCode, you can just start doing algorithms, but don't do that. Please don't do that. First, what you want to do is you want to go down here and click on algorithms. And instead of doing any average algorithm, there's a section right here at the bottom called top interview questions. That way you can focus your energy on the algorithm questions that they're actually going to ask you. So let's say you're going to practice on this one. Great. Let's go ahead and click here. I'll tell you what you don't want to do. Once you start clicking here, you know, first think about what you want to do and don't just start typing in your code. Why? First, grab a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil and start writing the code down on the paper that you want to do. Why? I'm not doing this to inconvenience you or to make your life hard. Yes.
Because they want to know that you know how to problem solve, not just spit out code. And a lot of that happens pen and paper, pencil and paper.
This is part of it. Yes, I do want you to learn how to problem solve. But the other thing is, if you're doing a whiteboard test, you're not going to have this IDE. It's not going to be available to you. So you're going to have to learn how to do it without the help of this thing's help. So yes, you know, I mean, what you said is absolutely true. And let's say you write your code out and you realize, wait, I want to go back and change it. Change it in the paper before you change it here, and then paste it over here, and then write it down here. Yes, this is going to take a long time. Yes, this is going to be hard, but this is worth it, because when I went to interview at Tyler Tech, which is a job that I love, it's the opposite of where I used to work. I mean, I get good pay, good benefits. I love what I do. They gave me a written test. And I didn't have the IDE to help me out. And because I did this, I was prepared and comfortable enough to do this. So let's go.
So I want to add, I think the most valuable thing about it is if you don't know how to solve a problem in English, you don't know how to solve it in code language X. Because so many people like post a question, how do I do this in such and such language? But it's obvious if you read their question in the forum, they don't know how to do it in English or Hindi or whatever language is their language of like speaking. So if you can get it out on paper, then you know what you're trying to look up rather than just shooting in the dark for, so that solve this in JavaScript or Python or whatever.
And this is right. I mean, this is about teaching you that next level of coding. Now, some of you will be like, well, when do you use whiteboards in an actual on the job? Honestly,
all the time. If you work on a team,
Well, yeah, if you're working on team, I've never had to use it because we all work remotely, so we don't have whiteboards. But maybe you might not work remotely, and and if it just gets you into a job, then it's worth it. Also, if you're working on these programs, this is going to take time, and this is hard. If you're stuck for after 20 or 30 minutes, get help. Don't grind there forever. I mean, I recommend going on YouTube. And like I said, you're gonna have to dedicate some time to this. It's gonna be a regular practice. I had to do this for weeks before my current job because in the current job they use Java, which I had to teach myself. I was learning it before I got the interview, but in my old job I used C#. So I had to get used to it, and this helped me to get comfortable for it. And maybe sometimes your first algorithm that you write is going to be a brute force, but you got to start somewhere.
So really code and like code wars, pretty much the same thing. Do you use code wars or have you used it?
I have used Code Wars, and Code Wars is really good. But the thing about Code Wars is this thing here with the top interview questions, it doesn't have that. So I used it a long time ago because one thing that Code Wars does and Code Signal does is it teaches you how to think like a computer programmer. But Code Wars just gives you different algorithms. It doesn't really focus on the interview questions. And maybe you want to work for Microsoft. Well, no.
So I've got a question for you. In the interviews that you've done, have you actually had to solve problems that are similar to these problems? For what companies?
Well, on these ones, the couple of interviews I've had, I honestly don't think I've ever had them, but you can see if you go on LeetCode, they'll rate them. So they'll be users rating how often these. I personally have not had it, but other users, they rate them. Now, I once lost a job because I bombed one of these whiteboard tests.
So yeah, but like, what was that experience like? What was the style of your interview question?
So what they did is they asked me, the one that I failed, they asked me, create an algorithm that gets all the prime numbers from between 1 and 100. Did I mean prime numbers? I can't remember the exact one, but I think it means, I think it's the prime numbers. And I had no idea what to do, and it was embarrassing, and it was bad. And I don't want you guys to be embarrassed or fail, but even though that question, I've never seen it here, that prepared me to whiteboard, because when I had to do that written test, no, it didn't have the questions here, but it got me comfortable with doing things written by hand. So it teaches you how to do that, because these both lessons, like the website you mentioned, Code Wars, and this one teaches you how to think like a computer programmer. That's probably not a very satisfying answer. That's just my personal experience.
No, when the presentation's over, I'd actually like to get people to share their experiences with what kind of things have come up. Because there's like the things that are the stereotypical things you're told.
Yeah.
And I work with small businesses, so our interview process is either when I'm hiring or interviewing, they're completely different from interviewing at Facebook. I've interviewed at Facebook, and I bombed that terribly.
Yeah.
But it's like there's different styles, and so I'm interested to see what the experiences were. But keep going.
All right. So I want to talk about soft skills. There's an element of the interview which is totally subjective. Maybe you're great at LeetCode and you're very good at what you do. Maybe you can ace all those algorithm tests, but if you're not a likable person, you will fail. It's that simple. I wish we lived in a purely medical, it was just based on merit, but there is a very human element to this. For example, when I interviewed at Tyler Tech, I did okay on the questions. For example, I didn't do very well on the question they were asking me about jQuery, which I hadn't practiced for a while, but at the end, the interviewer, he was wearing a Hawaiian shirt just like that. And he said, do you have any questions? And I said something to the effect is, yeah, where can I get a cool Hawaiian shirt like that? And he laughed. And after that, he said, you have my vote. And so you have to practice on those soft skills and come across as likable. That's also important for interviewing. I mean, it's not just enough to be a good computer programmer. Avoid arrogance. That is going to kill you. Someone once told me that the majority of people are fired not for incompetence, but arrogance. And the reason the soft skills are important is they're trying to see, is this person going to be a good team player? Are they going to be a fit for this company? Are we going to get along? When the interviewer asks you a question, don't just blurt out the answer, but tell them why you got there and your thought process, because that's what they really want. They want to know your thought process and not that you're just regurgitating something, automatically rehearsing it, so they can see how strong your critical thinking skills are. Also, be open to constructive criticism. The interviewer that talked to me went through my GitHub and criticized some of the code that I had done. And I remember answering, he's saying, I told him he was right, that code could have been written better. And that shows to that person that you're teachable and humble, because when you come on to that job, it's not just enough to know the vanilla language. They're going to have their own processes. They're going to have their own libraries, their own APIs. I know my job does that. They have to learn. So it wasn't just good enough that I learned new Java and SQL and JavaScript. They had other things I want to learn. So they want to see that you're a teachable person. And you also have to strike a balance between being overly humble and being a braggart, because I know some people don't like to talk about themselves. It feels uncomfortable, but you need to learn to talk about yourself in a matter-of-fact way, being honest about what you can and cannot do. That way you don't undersell yourself or oversell yourself. And be honest if you can't do something. I mean, like in that interview, I told them, I need to brush up on my jQuery, but I promised that if I got the job, I would spend the time from before I would hire and to brush up on jQuery. And just, express a desire to learn. Like I said, coding is collaborative. Someone once told me that coding isn't, you go down in the basement, you slide a pizza under the door, and you get code 8 hours later. No.
It is on a good day.
I have to go to meetings. I have to work with other computer programmers. I wish it was just all alone time. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do like my alone time, but often you'll do screen shares and we'll talk out together. So let your personality shine. And that's the same thing with interviewing. So that's been my presentation. Now, I wanted to share with you guys my resources. So what I learned from doing 60 technical interviews in 30 days, that's where I got the template for the cover letter, and I highly recommend doing that. Also, this gentleman has a really good video on YouTube, like learn to use LeetCode effectively and stop grinding. I highly recommend that one as well. I mean, these are some really good resources that are out there for you, and I'm gonna try to find them and put them in the chat so that you guys can use them too. Here's some other resources that I have, and also, one of the resources myself. Email me. I want you to succeed. I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did and wind up at the worst job ever, because that's not bueno.
All right, well, let's give Christian a hand.
Any questions, concerns? Yes.
Yeah, so with whiteboarding, if you start to fail when you're writing out a problem, is there anything you can do to kind of redeem yourself and bring yourself back up even though you don't know how to solve a problem? Is there anything you can do to bring yourself into a better type of light in their eyes?
Well, that is a good question. Coding is, like I said, is highly collaborative, and often whiteboarding will be you and the interviewer working together. So if you walk them through the process, your thinking process, and you just be honest, say, you know what, I'm kind of stuck, I'm not sure what to do. And here's where your soft skills, if they like you and you're letting your personality shine, they're going to be more than willing to help you out and show you, because they want to teach you, because often these are senior computer programs. If you're not a likable person, they're going to make things harder for you. They're going to make things terse. But one thing that you don't want to ask questions that are too open-ended, because that'll make them think that you're trying to make them do the interview. They're not interviewing, you are.
Okay.
So I want to answer that too. If they like you, they're trying to find a way for you to succeed. And even if they don't like you, but they know you, well, that's rare. Like, I'll hire someone I don't like if I know them and I know they do good work, because I'm interested in somebody that does good work over somebody that I'm going to go hang out with. But in the interview case, normally you don't know them. But if you aren't doing well at one part of the interview process, focus on your strengths. And I'll give an example. There was a guy that I wanted to hire for a position doing Node way back when. And I gave him a task to do a chat program. Like, this is one of those to-do apps, chat programs. There's a number of things that are very common in take-home projects that are supposed to take you in the realm of 4 hours. And if they take you longer, but you struggle through it, then you look good. He didn't quite have the experience to be able to fulfill the criteria that I laid out. But what he did instead was he was actually really good at design, and he was good at CSS. So his programming skills were actually a lot weaker than what I was intending to hire for. But his intuitive design and ability to wrangle CSS into making something look great were above what I was looking for. And then I realized, you know what, we don't have someone with enough skill like this on the team. So I hired him, and he did pick up the backend components, and he actually went on to even work in kernel code. So he went like way deep as he advanced in his career. And now he works, I think he's working at one of the big server companies. But when I hired him, I didn't hire him for what I was interviewing him for. I hired him for showing his strengths and helping me recognize that he had something to offer. And so there's a lot of ways that you can do that. I think the easiest one is showing your ability to document and communicate, because hardly anybody documents their code. In your bootcamp, I doubt a single one of you wrote documentation that was worth a darn. Like, all of your documentation sucks. If anybody were to go look at one of your projects, they would have no idea what it is, why it's useful, what it looks like, how to see a demo of it, and how to run it. So your code that you have on GitHub currently, I would suggest you actually just make private and take one or two of your projects and make them good. Make them so that your brother or your sister or your mom or your dad or your best friend could walk through the steps, copy and paste, and get the thing up and running. Like, if you can do something like that, documentation, I think, is knowing Markdown is a skill anybody can learn, and it takes literally 30 minutes to learn the entire language because it's got like 12 items in it, right? But that's one of the things where you can focus on being good in areas that they didn't expect. Also, everybody knows that it sucks to be watched and timed and in front of other people. So generally speaking, I think people who don't hate you are going to understand that if you completely fumble and screw up, that it is not indicative that you don't actually know how to solve a problem. It's indicative that this is an uncomfortable environment, and they will, if they want to find a reason to hire you, they're going to say, well, actually, how about instead, why don't you just take a minute and write it down? Or they'll give you an opportunity to show that you know what you are capable of. That even if you bomb on the whiteboard. I mean, at least
in my experiences, people are generally pretty forgiving with that. I think maybe if you go into like Facebook or Google, they're going to be a lot less forgiving because they have so many applicants. They're just trying to weed people out, and it's not about moving you forward as much as it is about cutting you out. Whereas when you work with smaller companies, it's about, okay, we need somebody to fill this position. We want to find ways to let people in to move them forward. But it's hard because when, you can't hire someone to train them and then have one of your senior engineers only getting half of his work done, and then also not have the person behind it.
It's good input. Any other questions, concerns?
Going back to the documentation, do you have any like resources that we can look at for how to write good documentation or anything like that?
So I do.
And are you talking like readmes specifically on like GitHub repositories, or are you talking also about like commenting in your code, like explaining what certain blocks of code do?
I'm talking about readmes, but so I've heard it said, if you've got lots of comments in your code's too difficult to understand. And I think there's a balance to that.
Mm-hmm.
The number one person that you want to document for is yourself. You want to learn to love you. You want to be the kind of person that when you're like looking at some code, instead of being like, who wrote this? Oh, it was me. You want to be like, oh man, this actually makes a lot of sense. Who wrote this? Oh, it was me. That's the kind of experience that you want to build for yourself. So I would say your target person should be your future self. You're dumb, your brain is small, you only have so much capacity. What can you use as tools to make yourself smarter than you are? And that has been one of the greatest things that helped me in my career. Is I've maintained a blog since day one, and all the time I'm like, oh crap, how do I solve that problem? And I go back, and sometimes my blog post is literally just a link to somebody else's blog post, but at least I have a place where I can reference things, and it looks good. If somebody else has a blog like that, where they put 3 lines of code and a link to somebody else's blog post, and that's on their profile, because when I look at a resume, I open up GitHub, and I'm just praying that I'm going to find a project that isn't crap. CRAAPP. Right, the Create React app puts that in the README, puts crap in the README. So at the top of the README, it says crap. And then there's nothing about the project. So I'm just praying that like I'll find a project that has some sort of description, and then I can look at a blog and see that they know how to communicate with themselves. So what you do for you, I think is really important. I might have veered a little bit. Did I answer that well?
Mm-hmm. That was my question, I don't know.
Oh yeah, that answered my question too.
Documentation is important. So I'm working on a website for the federal government right now. And when we upgraded it, everything broke, which we were planning on happening. And then suddenly we realized this website was not documented. Nobody told us how it was supposed to work. So we had to go to a copy of the website and reverse engineer it. That was bad. And this is a website from the federal government. Please document your work, because what's going to happen if you don't document your work, maybe you move on that project in your same company, you're going to get an IM. How does this work? Please help me. And it's going to take away from your time. It can come back to bite you. Or maybe you're the one who's going to have to go back. And you're going to be like, it's kind of like the joke is like, it's solving a murder mystery where you're both the detective and the murderer. You're trying to figure it out.
Well said. Well said.
That's what debugging is, and that's what's going on.
Did you pull that from somewhere, or did you come up with that?
Someone told me that. I just can't remember.
That's beautiful.
I can't take credit. All right. Any other questions? I think that was like any memes you want to share. I think I got that from a meme.
Well, I would be interested to know who has been interviewing, what has that been like, what's gone well, what hasn't gone well.
Yes.
I have an interview. So it was Revere Health, and they did a whiteboard interview, and it was for Angular, and they initially told me it was going to be JavaScript, so I studied that, and
Oh no.
Whoops. But they basically just handed me a laptop and said, walk me through my project. And that was the first portion of the interview. And then the second portion was, well, we have a fake app and we want to do this, and tell me how you would do it from start to finish. So that was the whiteboard portion, including data, what technologies you would use, how it would all connect, all that sort of stuff.
And when they're doing that, what they're testing is the depth of your understanding. The purpose is to reach where you fail.
Yeah.
So you are going to fail, but this is desirable because they want to see how far are you going to make it until you have to start BSing or asking them questions. And that they're just looking for that. It's. So how did that go? What was your feeling about that experience?
Pretty well. I'm trying to just like be good where I'm at with my current job, because it's like if I get one, it's cool, but if I don't, no biggie, you know, because I'm gonna go UVU and I need something flexible. So I thought it went pretty well, because they're like, well, how would you build this healthcare app? We need it for all of the providers, and all of the doctors have different schedules, and they have different specialties, and they have different room needs and all that. So I'm like, okay, we use Firebase, and we're going to do an object and an object and an object, and then you hook that up to your Angular app, and you got pages, and they're like, okay, now what if I wanted them to not have access to Firebase? What would you do now? Okay, now we got to create a login system, and we have to do security roles, and you got to go through all that fun stuff. So I don't think it went too poorly. I do know when I was going through the Angular app that I could not find where they stored their pages, and I was panicking a little bit for a minute. So, but eventually I hit it, and I'm like, oh, done, they're right there. That's where you store them.
Yeah, those things are difficult.
Because they
sometimes.
hide them in there, and it was like source app, this one, and I'm like, you did that. You did it for me.
And sometimes they don't do things on purpose. Like, you're going to bomb some interviews because the interviewer is bad. Like, I had an interview once where I was supposed to be interviewed by person X. Some schedule conflict happened. I showed up, and they were like, oh, person X isn't here, so we're going to have you meet with person Y. And it was a similar situation where they said, okay, this is what the interview is going to be like. And then what it ended up being instead is person Y badgering me for not doing it line by line the way that that person would. So I couldn't even get like 3 lines of code out before they were like, oh, well, why are you going to do it that way? Shouldn't you do it this way? I'm like, look, why don't you let me solve the problem? And then once I've solved the problem and I have a firm grasp of it, then let's go back and let's review it. I think at that point, the interview was over.
But you don't want to work with that person anyway, right?
No, I did not.
Well, you wouldn't want to be there anyway.
But what are some other experiences? Anybody else been interviewing?
Well, I have 2 interview experiences. One where I think I failed, and one where I did really well. So the first one, I learned my mistake, and I did well in the second one. First one, I knew the answer, and I gave the answer, and I did what you said, like I showed them the way I was thinking through it. But then they asked, like, what is it called? I'm like, I don't know, I just made it up. I was wrong. I was being, what was the word that you used? Like, I was being like, I'm smart, you know, like.
Arrogant.
Arrogant, yes,
Yeah.
I was being arrogant, right? And then, so I didn't get that job. The job that I have now, they asked me a technical question, but it didn't even require any code. I think the question that they asked was something like, okay, you're given a cake, and you can only cut it 3 times. I want 8 pieces. And so I was like, well, okay, can I have a piece of paper so I can visualize this? So I was kind of drawing there, and I drew a circle, and I drew 2 lines, and I'm like, okay, well, that gives me 4. And I started like thinking, okay, well, there's nowhere that I can put. I didn't know the answer, right? And I was like, well, I don't know how to do that. And I was very open about that. Like I showed what I was doing, and I showed why it didn't work the way I was doing it, and that I was stuck. And I admitted that openly. I'm like, yeah, this is the part where I probably just you know, I was very open about it. And they're like, well, let me give you a hint, right? Again, they liked me, so they were trying to help me succeed, right? And so they're like, a cake isn't two-dimensional, it's three-dimensional. So I drew it three-dimensional, and I immediately got the answer right after that. So it was, you know, like, oh, okay. So being humble and showing like where you fail and showing how, okay, with a little bit of help, you can solve a problem or whatever. I think they didn't even care that I could solve that problem. What they cared about was, like you said, the journey, how I thought about the problem, the analytical side of me, like how I was going to do it, and the fact that I got hired, right? So there are other questions too that were really good in that. But anyway, that was an interesting interview. Like the job that I have now is a really good job. And I don't think I was ever asked at any time a highly technical programming question, which was very different. Even though like I do highly technical things all the time. Anyway, those are my two experiences.
One of my former bosses gave me some great advice. He said, if you're working on a computer program or like on some code and you're stuck after 15, 20 minutes, stop.
Yes.
Get some help. Don't spend their hours because you're wasting your time and you're wasting the company's time. And that's one thing that I bet interviewers are looking to see. Are you humble enough to say, I'm stuck and I need help? Because they want the super guy who dies on the sword and takes the company with them. No. It's not gonna work. But let's continue talking about any other good or negative interviewing experiences you guys want to share?
I had one gnarly one once. The dude walked in and he looks over my resume and he's like, I don't see anything on here that looks like you can do this job. And I'm like, I have to explain my resume and how it relates to the position. And he didn't hire me because he thought I was sassy. And I'm like, I'm just a jerk. He was late to the interview.
No, I mean,
He was
so
attitude.
there's asymmetry too, because, you know, so if we already talked about 85% of the time that you get a job, it's going to be through someone you know, not through a cold application process. That's one of the reasons I was asking a little bit about some of these things that, like cover. I've never used a cover letter. I've never found a cover letter to be effective. Have you actually found a cover letter to be effective?
Well,
Or is that just something that people say?
Well, I think it is because at my last current job, I submitted a cover letter.
Was it online?
Yeah, it was online.
Okay. So it actually got printed and somebody had to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't get that job through somebody you knew?
No, the last job I have, I did not get it through someone I knew, but you know, that is the minority of cases. Most jobs, you're going to have to network. I'm a statistical anomaly.
So what I was leading into is there's asymmetry because you put your resume into one place and one person gets it. There's another person who's interested in making sure that the seats are kept warm. And then there's another person that's interested in making sure that the seats are kept warm in a way that sounds cost effective in a presentation. And there's another person that's interested in getting their work done. And then there's another person that's in charge of disrupting people who are getting their work done to have them interview people to find out if they could also do the work. And so you might go into an interview and you may have gotten interviewed by somebody who was in the middle of a project, who's having a hard time, facing a bunch of bugs, and really didn't want to be interviewed. Oh, okay.
And regional director.
Well, then probably wasn't a coding type of person. But my point is that the person that you interview with it all depends on the size and scale and politics of the company, but the person that you interview with may not have even seen your resume because it may be that far removed in the worst cases. And there may have been very poor communication as the process continues. The bigger the company is, the more likelihood there is that there was a communication error and you have to kind of re-clarify some things. I've heard, I've never flown out to do one of the interviews at one of the big four, but if you ever fly out for an interview, which is probably a little bit away from where people are right now,
Yeah.
I've heard that it's quite advantageous to stop by Walmart and pick up your own dry erase markers beforehand and like some other things like that. Like make sure you have the pen, because they're going to be very terse with you, and they're not going to be prepared, and their dry erase markers are going to be used, the pen isn't going to be there, so they're going to ask you to do things. Again, it's the reverse. Small companies, they're trying to find a way to like you so they can hire you, so they can get people. Large companies, they're trying to find a way that they can just get rid of you, and they put less effort in sometimes, depending on the company. And so if you do things like that, little small things, to make sure that you're prepared, that you can handle the type of situation that the interviewer is likely to face, that's kind of like their problem, that you solve their problem. I have not experienced this myself, but I've heard that can make you look really good as well. But I think in general, surprising people, it's like dating. It really is. Like your resume's crap, but then, you show up with some ace in the corner pocket or whatever, crossing the streams there. But you try to find a way to surprise or impress the person outside of the code. Though, if you can write code, that's quite impressive. I don't mean to understate that by any stretch of the imagination. But I personally, I do really, really bad at trick questions. It's like, so for example, if somebody were to ask me cut a cake into 8 slices, my first question would be, what do we need 8 slices for? And usually in the type of trick question scenario, that just like immediately gets them flustered, because they're asking you a trick question. There's no rhyme or reason to whatever they're doing. And personally, I get confused with those. But on the flip side, the majority of the time when I ask those types of questions, people are impressed because they see that you're able to think about the customer experience and how your piece fits into the whole. So those of you that have not gotten to the interview process, what is holding you back right now?
Just waiting to graduate from the bootcamp. And we have at Dev Mountain, we have an outcomes team that we meet with every Friday that goes over this type of stuff. And they said to not interview until you're closer to being done with the boot camp. And I think from what they told me. So yeah.
I would go against that slightly, in that you could do some throwaway interviews. If there's enough of a job market, which here it seems like there probably is. And by the time you finish the boot camp, the probation period would probably be up. So unless you make such a terrible impression that they hate you, then you would be eligible to reapply by that time anyway. But I think it's good to go through the process to experience. My dad says, pain is fear leaving the body. I don't think it's just my dad that says that. He picked it up from his grandpappy, 300 years back. But I find that to be really, really true. When you experience failure and you become accustomed to it, and the ways that you can fail, you actually become more confident. So if you go through the interview process and you bomb it, you at least have the experience, and then that lowers your anxiety and increases your confidence and your ability to perform. So I 100% agree, you shouldn't interview expecting to get a job, but it may not hurt.
So you get the practice, right?
You should get the practice.
Okay.
I want to add something to that really quickly. If you go onto meetup.com, you can find groups that meet remotely where they practice in your technical interviewing, so you're not losing out on anything. That's something to look into. I know they had that in Colorado. I don't know if those groups are still around, but they probably are. They just probably meet over Zoom. Does someone else have a question?
I got the suggestion actually to, when you have instructors or people come to school, ask them to do a mock interview with you.
Yeah.
You can't lose anything by doing it. And then they can walk you through the interview, and they tend to be a little nicer, so you kind of It's like a soft
Yeah.
teacher.
Okay.
Okay, the rest of you that haven't spoken yet, where are you hung up at? Where,
I'm still cleaning up my resume and LinkedIn accounts and just trying to get those polished. But once I do, yeah, I'm gonna start applying.
do you have any portfolio items that are polished?
Well, yeah, that's part of my list I need to do. So yeah, like my GitHub's kind of a mess right now. So
Again, like just make everything private. Just select one or two projects that you actually care about and that you can write documentation for that is easy to communicate with somebody.
One thing you can do is on your GitHub, you can actually put links to your websites so that they could say, oh, he's gone to that, and click it and go right to your website. It's a cool thing. And you can have people recommend you, like your skills. So let's say maybe you're learning JavaScript. You can tell a friend, hey, would you recommend me on this? And I'll recommend you, and have people write you reviews, and you can do it reciprocally.
And the LinkedIn quizzes, well, I don't know if they're still doing it. They were doing it a while ago.
They still are.
But the LinkedIn quizzes are actually pretty cool because there's only like 10 questions, but the breadth of the questions, I was impressed. I mean, I'm not going to hire someone based off of doing the LinkedIn questions, but there are areas where I'm an expert that I did the LinkedIn questions and it took me to a place where I hadn't been before. And you can Google, I mean, if you can find the answer in the 30 seconds that you have to answer, that is valid. That's not cheating. That is the real life. So if you have enough knowledge to be able to Google the solution in that limited time, then you have the right amount of knowledge. But anyway, I did find those to be confidence inspiring. They weren't stupid. I didn't look at it and say, oh, this is just some retarded thing. Nobody would get benefit from this. The LinkedIn questions, I recommend that you take them, fail them, whatever, retake them. It will give you more vocabulary. It will stretch your knowledge. Oh, that's another thing, vocabulary. I don't know if you've noticed this. People don't know what things are called, and so they just use random words.
Know what an array is, okay? Figure it out.
Well, also, like the difference between dash and slash, that blows my mind because people have read it, but they don't know what the name is. They know how to copy and paste it from Stack Overflow, but they don't know the name of an angle bracket or a slash. You should know the name of every character that you type, and you should not accidentally get them confused. And I see people just make up terms all the time where it's like, you know, like the dingle hopper in The Little Mermaid. Like, oh, what's this? Oh, it's a dingle hopper. You use it to curl your hair. And I see that literally happen where people they take a code pattern and they call it the Flisdemuffer. And it's like, well, actually, that's a common pattern. It has a name. It's can't make up a real name.
And this is where Google comes in, like you were saying, use Google for those quizzes, use it to find out the vocabulary. I still have to do that sometimes too, and I have 2 years of coding programming experience. I still have to use Google all the time to do research. So don't be afraid to use it, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
And things have really dumb names. The official real names of things, like I think it's so important to know them because then you can have a conversation with someone and know that you're communicating, but some of them are so stupid. It's
Go for
and
that one's not as much dumb, it's just different, something I'd never heard of before until I started learning how to code.
I don't know anyone who calls it that except in jest or
Yeah.
being pretentious. It's the hash or pound sign.
Mhm.
But yeah, I was thinking, I don't remember what I was thinking now, but just, yeah, there's a lot of things out there. Like for example, in authentication, there's authentication is like a state ID. Authorization is like a key card that can get you through a room. People will just throw things around, like they call anything that is a string a JWT, for example. No, a JWT is a very specific thing, or like a cookie.
When you save something in local storage, that is not a cookie. A cookie is a specific thing. And so hopefully I'm hitting on some of the stuff that you have heard enough to know to distinguish, but I see people crossing the streams, and it's not like necessarily that's going to bomb an interview for you. It's just when you're working with other people, it's very frustrating to try, it's like, if you've ever seen that image where somebody's looking at a cylinder and the other person's looking at a square, or one person's looking at a circle, the other person's looking at a square, but then it turns out it's a cylinder. It's kind of like that, except that the thing is actually called a triangle and isn't a circle or a square. So, but you two, what have you got?
So I'm kind of in the same boat as him. I'm still going through Dead Mountain Bootcamp. I've got like 7 weeks left. So just kind of, I don't know, waiting to get further along before I start seriously searching. So
You'll definitely come to the meetups, and again, hopefully, well, this one was obviously targeted towards beginners, but come to things that are over your head, where you know that you're going to be the least smart person in the room. Because then you'll be with the smartest person in the room, and they have the job.
it's true. So these like once a month?
Mhm.
Then?
And I'd recommend trying out a couple and see what suits you. Because the language that you learn to learn programming is not necessarily the language you should build your career on. But any language you learn to learn programming, once you learn how to program, languages have different paradigms. It's good to learn them so that you understand paradigms, but you don't feel like you're a React developer or what, because then you're a small fish in a big pond. If you can carve out something that's more niche or more specific, then you can be a bigger fish in a smaller pond, and then also you can compare and contrast. You can know why one tool is better than another. And then where are you at right now?
I'm talking Lehigh.
Oh, that's why I heard of MTech, because of you.
Yeah, and my program ends, the classroom work ends the beginning of October, and then we get what we call an externship, which is 6 to 12 weeks, depending on if you're full-time or part-time. So that's where I'm at. So I'm starting to put out billers for the externship or internship.
Well,
If I can find a place to do that, that's not super difficult, I guess.
I will be sending out, there's a couple of people that were talking about jobs, so make sure that you are subscribed to the notifications on Meetup and get into the Discord. The Discord is basically zero volume right now. I'm the only person that posts in it, but if you ever have a question, you can feel free to ask me there, and I will post things as like jobs come up and stuff. We'll post that on Meetup.
I know that my job is hiring. Anyone wants to talk to me about that afterwards, I'm happy to discuss that with you.
85%. So those of you that are online, sorry, I'm not very good at the whole online thing and making sure that I include you. I forget that you're there, so always feel free to call out. But do y'all have any experiences either with interviewing or where are you at? What's holding you back right now?
Yeah, this is Josh talking right now. I'm in doing Python development right now, and I still have like 7 weeks to go. So haven't started applying for jobs or anything like that.
Okay, and are you local or are you just joining in from somewhere else in the world?
I'm in Salt Lake City, but I couldn't quite make it down tonight.
Okay.
I'm Nathan. I think the biggest thing right now that's holding me back is just not really knowing what I should do for projects. Like I want to figure out some projects that'll help me show like my comprehensive skills, but I don't really know where to start.
What development? What development are you doing? Are you focused on Node?
Yeah, I'm focused on Node, JavaScript, just basically front end development.
So that's not the same. Node is not front end development.
Yeah, okay.
can I add to Nathan's question? I mean, yeah, building on that, when we put together projects, like I've been told, my brother is a programmer, and he said to have, like three really good projects up on GitHub. Should these projects focus on one thing, or they should be like a kind of a smorgasbord of like a lot of different things that gets accomplished, or what should we focus on for these projects? Or what do like employers want to see?
I would say documentation, because no one's going to look at your code unless they understand what the thing does and why. If I look at a project and I can understand what it does, then I look at the code. If I can't understand from the README what the project is, then I'm not likely to look at the code, because I'm going to assume that it's some junk half-baked project that doesn't have anything valuable inside, and it would just be a waste of my time to look at the code, because I'm going to see a bunch of auto-generated garbage and I'm not going to see something valuable. So if you want to get me out of that mindset, or I'm definitely different from other people, but I think that that's probably fairly common. Focus on the documentation of the project, explaining what you're doing and why you're doing, so that I'm enticed to want to look at the code.
Huh, interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that. So thanks for clarifying.
I think it is pretty common that because what would it even do? Like, what would I be evaluating the code for? What strength am I going to evaluate? If I know that your code is a chatbot, I'm going to be like, okay, let's see what socket type you chose to use. Was it WebSockets? Was it TCP? Was it UDP? And like, how did you handle that? Like, how did you handle the problems with that particular type of socket? If I don't know what the code is, I don't even know what I'm going to look into evaluate you for to say like, oh, you did this because you're probably proficient in X. I should look at the X part and not the Y part. Anyway, Christian, you cut you off there.
Oh, no problem. I agree with what he said, and I'll also add, if you need an idea for a project, I know my favorite thing in the world is YouTube. There's so many ideas for projects, and they'll often, give you a couple of ideas and some help on building that project. That'll get you in the door. And also, like, I want to echo what he said, document it. I shouldn't have to struggle if I'm the interviewer to open up your project and get it working and use it. It shouldn't be like that federal government website. I'm a little bit bitter, just a little bit.
Has anybody ever created an EIN before? The website shuts down at 5 p.m. Eastern time to this day. If you go on the website right now, you cannot submit the form. It comes up with an error saying, this form is only active until 5 p.m. Eastern time. Aside. One specific project I would recommend, and I'd love to hear from other people if you've got any recommendations, but one project I specifically would recommend is Tree. There's a program called Tree, and there's another program called LSD that has a -- tree option. Re-implement Tree, because if you can re-implement Tree, it means that you understand the basics of files and folders, you understand how to do recursion and to loop, and to manage potentially large sizes of objects in memory, or not necessarily manage them in memory, but a way to handle a large number of objects. So Tree is one that I definitely recommend, and I also think little passion projects. So some stupid thing where you're like, the Notes app on iOS is great except that. Make a stupid Notes app that the only thing it does is the one thing that you wish that the iOS Notes app does, or something similar to that. Like Slack is great except that. And then go build a little chat app and just focus on the one thing that Slack doesn't do well. But the to-do app, the chat app, those are kind of staples, and they're easy to build, they're easy to evaluate, and they're easy to add something slightly different from what someone has seen before based on the thing that bugs you. Like be a critic, focus on things that bug you, and find a small way to fix one thing that bugs you, even if you have to mock it. Like maybe something about iMessages you don't like. You're not going to be able to write a telephone server, but you could mock it out and make it pretend and demonstrate what it is that you want. Other ideas for projects? So Dev Mountain used to be really good about eliciting project ideas from students and then doing a collaboration towards the end where like 3 or 4 of you work together and build something. And I saw a lot of really cool passion projects come out of that. Have you done any of that yet?
Yeah, I just got out, so like I'm a week out of graduation, so we just finished. So I was actually the iOS development cohort, so we just made an app and it's really cool and really fun to do, and so just waiting on a review for that.
That's cool. The thing that I made on a phone once was, I think I called it Trash Talk, and it text messaged the roommates on Tuesday to say, hey, somebody go take out the trash.
It's a good name.
It may not have been Trash Talk, but it was something pithy like that. But it never got published, and then the Mozilla phone crashed and burned, and no one's even heard of it anymore. But I still have one. But it was really cool because you could write your apps in JavaScript. Other projects, ideas, things that you think have been like simple, easy to demonstrate, easy to document?
I built a quiz app that takes an API from
Excellent.
like open trivia database, and you can pick different levels, and it saves the high scores to Firebase, and then you can go on there and see where you rank against other people.
Nice.
That one was pretty easy to implement. It doesn't have a backend at all, but front end wise, it was pretty fun to make.
No, that's great. Note card quizzes, Harry Potter house sorting, any of the nerddoms that you can rope into quizzes, love languages, personality tests, all that stuff make really great apps. You can do it in command line, you can do it on a phone, you can do it in a web browser. Thanks for bringing that up. Any more thoughts? So with that, again, if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe if you found this useful, if there was something that gave you a good idea, good thought. And we post these about once a month. And for those of you that are here, we have a lot of pizza that's gone cold, but there's a microwave right over there. So that doesn't have to be a problem that keeps us from filling our bellies. And if you want to stick around and chat for a little bit, I have 30 minutes before I need to kick us out.